I know that what I'm doing is I'm making this big shift in the dynamics that have existed for generations. So, of course, it's going to feel a little bit lonely. Of course, it's going to feel a little bit isolating. But how beautiful to be able to be that bridge and know that I have support from my ancestors who dreamt of these kinds of experiences before.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Bare and Brutal podcast for season 2. We are the podcast where we bare our feelings and are brutally honest. Each week, we get the honor of hearing from incredible members and allies of the BIPOC community who share their stories of resilience, of failure, of transformation, anything under the sun, and just very real firsthand accounts of exactly what it means to be human. I'm your host, Michelle. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're glad you're here. Today, I am thrilled to announce that our guest today is Dr. Lisette Sanchez, an award-winning bilingual and bicultural licensed psychologist. She's a celebrated speaker and insightful writer from Southern California. Raised in San Fernando Valley by hardworking immigrant parents, Dr. Lisette's personal journey is what deeply informs the work that she does. She is a dedicated advocate for the BIPOC community and first-generation professionals, helping them navigate the complexities of mental wellness. Dr. Lisette is on a mission to demystify and destigmatize mental wellness, particularly for Latin first-gen professionals. And we are so honored to have her share her story with us today. So thank you so much for joining us, Lisette.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so happy to be here. And guest appearance is my cat, who he may jump away, but I just want to acknowledge him. For anyone on video, he's a star, really. He's my emotional support sweetheart.
We love Louie.
Yes.
I'm just excited for our conversation today. We will get right into it. I think, to give context to the audience, just kind of like almost all my guests, I feel like I just find myself scrolling on my Explore page on Instagram, and I think that's how I discovered your page. I was like, oh, eldest daughters. I was like, that looks like a post I need, and things kind of steamrolled from there. I saw your profile, I saw the things that you were doing, the work in the community, and I was like, oh my goodness, let me shoot my shot. And I messaged you, and I'm so thankful that you took the chance on the Bare and Brutal podcast and you're here. So I would love it if we could just start off by, I guess, outlining for the audience kind of like your personal journey, your background.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit about your upbringing in California, how that maybe has shaped who you are or the work that you do now?
Yeah. Oh, such a big question. I was like,
no. We're starting off strong.
Yes. Well, okay. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in North Hollywood, and so for anyone who may not know where that is, it's if you are from LA or if you've ever been to LA, most of the time people see the Hollywood sign. I grew up behind the Hollywood sign. So I always give people landmarks, like behind that. You see that hill that the Hollywood sign is on? I'm behind it. That's where San Fernando Valley is. And that's where I grew up. Very different. It's not like, I think I always thought, people have a certain expectation of what LA was like. But for me, it's always been home. It's always been this, what I refer to it as this ethnic enclave, like this area where I felt very safe, very protected. And I was very much surrounded by people who looked like me, who had the same shared experiences. And although it may not have been the safest area, it felt very safe in the familiarity. So I'll just speak to it in that way. And when I say safe, it's just certain neighborhoods, certain pockets of LA at the time that I was growing up, gang activity was still pretty active, and so there's just memories that I have from that, but a lot has changed now. It's very, very different, which is nice. Yeah. But I want to kind of speak to that, to kind of share a little bit about the roots and the spaces that I grew up in. And that will explain a little bit about why my parents were a bit overprotective and very strict and very cautious with their child, wanting to me be safe and to take care of me. So I grew up in this very strict Catholic household, where, there were very high expectations around the different things that I did, and just very big dreams for me. But the very big dreams that my parents had were, they had this idea of what I guess, the American dream would look like.
Yeah.
And I had a very different idea of what the American dream would look like. My parents' American dream was based in instability. Right? Like, we were coming here to another country, and my parents, I didn't say this, my father is from Mexico. My mother is from El Salvador. And, you know, the common immigrant narrative is to, when they, at least they're coming to the US, you're coming here in search of a better life, of some American dream. So my parents' American dream was, again, the stability, the safety, because they were not having that stability or safety in their home countries.
Mm-hmm.
But then my American dream was freedom, taking risks, exploring, experiencing the world, having what I heard as a kid was, we want a better life for you. And I took that in and I'm like, okay, well, what does a better life mean to me, right? Like, and to me, it meant having these really big dreams for my career, traveling, exploring. My dad's mom, my grandmother, she tells me a story when I was a little girl that scared her, because she's like, I used to ask you what you wanted to do when you grew up, and then you started to point at the sky. You're like, I want to go. And she's like, what does that mean? And then now she's like, but now I understand. You just wanted the most. You wanted to travel. You wanted to experience throughout these journeys. You know, my family, although they may not go and experience all of these things with me, they get to experience a lot of it through me and navigate that. So I speak to that because my parents, again, because our dreams were a little bit different, we had a little bit of tension initially when I started to stray away from their version of my American dream. Their version of the dream was, you know, you stay home, you go to college nearby, you don't move out until you're married, you know, I think what most many immigrant parents, I think, expect from their children. At 18, I was like, Mom, I got into school. It's 2 hours away. I'm going to go live in the dorms and bye. And it was, and I say it all joke. I laugh because it's, you know, my parents, and my family, you know, it was a shock. It was a shock to them. They were, they ended up supporting me, but they were not happy about it, right? They were like, you have been brainwashed into leaving us. You know, like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to live at home until you're at least 25. How dare you leave us? And just having these, because again, they had their own narrative of the dream and what it would be. But what they told me growing up was, we want you to have a better life than us. And that's what I heard. And that's what I went with. That's what I ran with. And I want to come back a little bit. So how did I get into the field of mental health and as a psychologist? It was also because of my parents. So when I started school, when I was in elementary school, I don't know if you've ever been to a first day of school with the kindergartners, but if you were my teacher, I want you to picture this little girl with like curly hair, crying, holding on to her mom's leg and being like, don't leave me, don't abandon me. And which is, I think, most parents, it's the worst nightmare, you know, because then you literally having to claw your child away from you, leave you there. And the desperation that my parents felt was what led them to actually listen to the teacher when she said, you should take her to see a psychologist. Let's get her some help with this. And that's when I had my first exposure to a psychologist. And, you know, I was so little, I don't remember a lot of it, but that's when I first was exposed to, wow, there's a career where you can talk to people, help them, support them through some of their most challenging moments. And okay, as however old you are at kindergarten, that was my most challenging moment at the time. I was very afraid. I was very scared. And my parents were as well. So despite all of the stigma, despite anything they were like, for our child, we want a better life. So that means that we will do things that are uncomfortable. And that included that. So anyway, at some point I got it in my head, that's what I wanted to do. And my earliest memory was in middle school. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what I worked towards. You know, I went to high school and I'm like, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to become a psychologist. And Michelle, let me tell you that when I got to college, that's when I realized that you don't become a psychologist after 4 years. you have to do more. Because again,
Yeah.
I'm first gen.
Just a little bit more work.
Just a little bit more work. I'm first gen. My mom and dad didn't finish high school, so I was also first to graduate high school. So there was a lot of trailblazing, a lot of unknowns. But my parents, again, looking back, I realized all the lessons were all there. They just didn't realize the way that I was interpreting them. Right? They come to another country, they bet on themselves, they take the biggest risk. I'm like, okay, I gotta bet on myself. I gotta take the biggest risk. They left, so much behind. And I realized, like, for me to take this big risk, that does involve me needing to leave the nest so that I can grow. And like I mentioned before, my parents maybe weren't so happy about it, but they naturally leaned into different support systems. My mom had a coworker who really helped her accept sort of what was happening. And she said, like, in Spanish, he said it in Spanish. I'll say it in Spanish and I'll translate. So my mom says, mujer, los hijos son prestados, los tienes que dejar volar. And it's, your children are borrowed. You have to let them go. You have to let them fly. And she said through these conversations that helped her accept a little bit more. Because remember, for her, it was but when we moved to LA, everyone came. Or it's with my mom and with my mom, at least everyone came. Her sisters, my grandmother lived around the corner. I grew up with everything. It was like very, very tight family system.
Yeah.
So even though I was like, I'm only going 2 hours away, and I was strategic, Michelle. I was like, I went to UC San Diego because my dad's family is in Tecate, which is a border town in Mexico. So I was an hour away from Tecate, 2 hours away from home. I'm like, Mom, I'm between all the family. It's going to be okay. I have everyone. Everyone's near me. Ultimately they began to understand. They still had moments where it was a bit of a struggle because the distance was hard. But initially, you just want to get away from us. And you know what? They're partially right. Because let's be honest, most 18-year-olds who grew up in very strict households, they kind of want to escape a little bit. I'm not going to deny that. But remember that little girl who would tell her grandmother her dream was to go there. Her dream was to go up there. I was just following my dream my whole life, right? Of just doing the most. So anyway, going back to college, UC San Diego, go to San Diego. You know how they have admit day? I convinced my parents to go with me. And that's when I decided that that's where I was going to go, because I remember getting to the campus, and right now, fall is, when students are starting to go to college, experience that for the first time. And I think it's especially magical as a first gen, because you're going and all I saw in those moments was all of the hopes and the dreams that I've had my whole life. And I knew it was going to be hard, but you walk around, you look at everything. And if you're familiar with the UC San Diego campus, they have this huge library, Geisel Library, that kind of looks like a spaceship, honestly. It's like glass all around that kind of reflects. And I just remember feeling like, wow, and it's right next to the beach. Like, we got ocean view from our dorms.
Yeah.
It's like, this is it. This is the big dream, right? And yeah, that's when I learned that being a psychologist does not take 4 years. You don't graduate with your bachelor's and you're like psicóloga. You needed a PhD for that. And then it was one step at a time, right? Then I was like, okay, well, what do I need next? And I say this because I think as first gens, sometimes these dreams feel so big that they feel impossible. But I think that what really helped my journey was that I knew I wanted to dream big. Again, sky. I realized there's a sky image behind the sky, but I didn't really understand how big of a dream it was. So what essentially my not knowing meant that it actually got broken up into a lot of smaller goals along the way, right? Get into college, then get my GPA up so that I could apply to PhD programs, and doing a McNair Scholars Program to help me with that, like seeking mentorship, asking questions. And I say all of this while also I want to acknowledge the other part was I was also really shy and really quiet, never went to office hours. And so I was constantly pushing myself out of my comfort zone, knowing that that's what I needed to do. And I had a lot of help from my immediate community. So just like my suite mates, we were like, we should go to this, we should go to that. So again, I think my mindset is, it's the fall, students are going to college, and are maybe starting for the first time. It's really beautiful to create a community and connect with a community, because that is really what gets you through these difficult moments.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, one, thank you for outlining your entire start
Good.
to how you made the decision to become a psychologist. There's a lot of layers there. One, I wanted to affirm and kind of commend your parents for bringing you to a psychologist at a young age like that. I mean, you said despite, the stigma about it, they're like, we're going to get my daughter help. I feel like that speaks volumes for your parents to
Mhm.
take that step, because so many families, like immigrant parents, you know, they're like, they don't want to acknowledge, they think getting help in that way means that something's wrong with your child, right?
Yeah.
Or like it's going to look bad on the family. So the fact that they did that is
Mhm.
amazing. And just that one moment in your life has kind of steamrolled into who you are today, which I think is kind of beautiful how full circle that is.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other point I wanted to respond to was just the experience of being a first gen in your family, like first everything, right? Like you said, first one to graduate high school, then going to college and
Mhm.
moving away out of the house. Like I definitely resonate with that experience too, with Vietnamese parents. It's very much an Asian culture that you stay with your family forever.
Yeah.
Like it's a normal
Yeah.
thing for you to stay with your
Yeah.
parents and live with them until you're like 35, and then you get a family and you move into a house, and then your parents move in with you, and it's like
Mhm.
this community thing, like where you stay together. And so coming into America, where we're sold that idea, like you don't, like, white families, they're like, oh, 18, you're out of the house. And
Mhm.
so I think that it's a beautiful thing in our cultures that we have such a close knit family dynamic. But I also think that in my experience, and maybe you can also touch on this too for your experience, but sometimes it can feel a bit suffocating. And especially when you have dreams or goals that are opposite to what your family wants, it makes you feel guilty for wanting those
Mhm.
things. And so
Mhm.
I'm curious, have you experienced that kind of guilt, especially being the first one to, even though it was only
Yeah.
2 hours away, like being the first one to make that decision, say, no, I want this life. I'm going to go after these big dreams.
Yeah.
How did you deal with it? Did you feel any guilt?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Michelle. Like there's so many. I mean, just like all of our lived experiences, there's so many small moments and big moments that lead to like all these different emotions that we feel throughout the decision making process. So
Mm-hmm.
I gave you kind of cliff notes how it was, but it was definitely hard. But like I said, like I ultimately, like big picture, my parents did end up supporting me, right? They didn't
Yeah.
stop me from going. They didn't, they I did have a Cal grant that covered my tuition, and I did have an on-campus job. But if I ever needed anything else, they were there to support. But that said, my first quarter on campus, I get a call from my grandmother. This is the one who like helped raise me, my mom's mom, and she's like, she calls me. She's like, "Your mom's sick, and it's your fault." And I smile about it now because I'm like, oh my God, the amount of pressure that we feel as
Yeah.
first gen sometimes and that is placed on us. I remember crying after that call, but my aunt, she said, you left her. She's so sick, like with worry and grief. And
Yeah.
how could you have done this to her? And like as much as this was the big dream, like as much as I was like, yes, I finally get to have some space, have my own room, not even my own room. I was still sharing a room, but I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment with my parents and my brother, and occasionally my cousin lived with me, my grandmother stayed, whoever needed a place to stay. The door was always open. There was always room, regardless of how small and humble the place was. There was always room for anyone who was in need.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't have to share one bathroom with X amount of people. I
Yeah.
get at least there's multiple stalls with 14 girls now. It just felt a lot easier. But yeah, the guilt was there. The guilt was there in moments. So I think initially I would come home every other weekend because of that guilt. Honestly, I still talk to my mom every day.
Yeah.
And it's hard. That's a hard habit to break. But now it's just smaller, shorter conversations, and I've learned to set more boundaries around it. But at the time, oh, Michelle, if my mom could not get a hold of me, she started calling each one of my suite mates and dorm mates until she could find me. And so it was definitely there, and then the behaviors were there. But looking back in the moment, of course, it's frustrating, but in a lot of the work that I do a lot of narrative work, and in the narrative work, it's being able to look back and recognize that we have an opportunity to change the way that, like, our perspective about what happened to us, and to shift that narrative. So for me, I look back and I think, yeah, it was hard to be parentified, to be placed in the role of an adult as a child, right? Especially my parents didn't graduate high school, so they needed a lot of help with documentation, with translating. And remember, I said I was a really shy kid. The amount of times I was really anxious when I had to, even ask for go ask for a price check on this. Okay. And I'm like so nervous, so afraid of just like the smallest interaction, but I would do them because that's sort of what I had to do. And that was a few examples, some that I'm sure, again, a lot of immigrant children can relate to. But anyway, now I look back and I think about it. It's, as an eldest daughter, I have a younger brother. He's 6 years younger than me. But as an eldest daughter, being put in this position to do all of these things, I have an option on how I look back at it. I look back at it and I can think back and say, like, that's really upsetting that they did this. But then I also recognize that they are only repeating what they knew. They're only repeating what they had learned. And I had an opportunity where I got to be this bridge for my family, where I got to bridge the two cultures. Now, was it an easy path? No, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, pretend this was like happy-go-lucky. But what an honor when I think about all of my ancestors and all of the, because I come from, like a community-based culture. Like, we're not individualistic, we're collectivistic. And with that, it's not just the current generation, it's the ones past us. So although this journey may feel selfish in moments, I know that what I'm doing is I'm making this big shift in the dynamics that have existed for generations. So of course it's going to feel a little bit lonely. Of course it's going to feel a little bit isolating. But how beautiful to be able to be that bridge and know that I have support from my ancestors who dreamt of these kinds of experiences before.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what a honor, but also what a huge responsibility as a person. And I think we talked about this in our initial conversation too, about just the intergenerational trauma that is passed down, and it can be a heavy burden to carry at times. And so I'm curious if you could speak on more of this process of reclaiming, reframing narratives. I'm interested in that too, because I think it's really essential in the healing process.
Yeah.
To have that skill of being able to look at something and recognize, yeah, that happened to me, and what can I do with that now? How can I move forward?
Yes, yeah. And so something about narrative, right? I want to say it is our unique story. It's finding our voice in the story. Someone may look back at that and have a different perspective, and that's okay. But that's part of the work that I've done with healing, with my own therapy. Something I will say, that when you're going to therapy, something that makes the biggest difference is when you finally have a strong sense of safety. And I think a part of that journey was seeking that safety, creating that safety for myself, and having this degree, having a job that would provide for myself. I knew I would have income, maybe not necessarily stable, because now I'm an entrepreneur, so there's it's a little bit different. But I want to just kind of honor that I'm speaking from a space of where I've been able to heal. But in order for me to feel this ability to heal, I have to create a sense of safety first. And something that I know specifically for anyone who grows up low income or working class, anything where finances were concerned, money does make a big difference. And when we feel that psychological safety, when we don't have to worry about, can we afford our groceries this week? Yeah. Can I pay for gas? How much money? Every time I'd go to the grocery store for a long time, it was, okay, how much money is in my account? What can I afford? Making sure I have my list. going through everything, and I'm like, okay, can I afford this? Can I do this? And for me, at this point in my life and where I am with, after having my degree, working as hard as I have, I can go to a grocery store. I like Trader Joe's, which as a kid, it's like, that was an expensive store. You can't go
Yeah.
there. And I love being able to go. And for me, I'm like, it's wealth. It's getting to walk into the store knowing that any grocery that I want is something that I can afford and that I can have. Do I want chicken today, or do I want steak? Whatever I want, I can get, and I can afford that, right? And I bring this up because as we go to shift the narrative, you want to make sure you have that psychological safety and the I guess I would call it environmental safety in different spaces. So this is a financial safety. If you're worried about how you're going to pay your rent, how you're going to do any of these other, like how you're going to survive, it's
Yeah.
really hard to start looking back and to think about things differently, because in that moment, all we feel is like, I can't look 10 steps ahead. I'm looking just one, because I'm just trying to put one foot in front of the other. So I want to just honor that just to be really honest and transparent. Like,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And I think that was a big reason I think I wanted to go for the PhD as well, because I knew, I was like, a doctoral degree also means more doors that are open, more power. And I think as I progressed through my education, I also understood the larger need for representation. So I want to just kind of honor those pieces. So we come back. So the narrative work, and what does that look like? So once you have all of the safety that you need, once you're in a place where you feel ready to go, and you're in this growth mindset where you know that you are capable of change, that's when you can begin to sort of look back and think about the experiences and think about, okay, what does this mean to me now? Right? Because there's definitely plenty of experiences that I look back on and I'm like, yeah, no, I shouldn't have had to experience that as a kid. No child should have to experience that. But I choose to think back and say, well, what part of this narrative do I want to highlight for myself that becomes part of my current story, my current way of being and existing? And so it's pretty, I guess it's more complex than just say, do this. But I'd say, like if I was breaking it down, um, I'd say reflect on your sense of safety. There's this concept, there's this theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you look at that, it will tell you like the different tiers of safety that we need to have. It's particularly that bottom tier that has like our financial, our food, all of those needs. Once you feel like you are good in those, then it's easier to think back to what are the lessons of these experiences. But as long as those needs are not met, it's very hard to see the lesson in something when you're looking at your bank account and you're overdrafted and you don't know how you're going to pay rent next month. You don't know how you're going to do XYZ, and you have to kind of just trust and have faith.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate you holding space for that and acknowledging that, because I think that's a really real aspect of healing that I don't see a lot of representation, on social media. You go online and I talked about this before. I think mental health has been a lot more openly talked about nowadays, but it's very much like, heal and grow and address your trauma. But I'm not sure that there's a lot of content out there that recognizes that there's a whole host of steps that you need to take before you are even ready to make that decision to heal. Exactly like you're saying. There are needs that need to be met. How can I even worry
Mhm.
about, I don't know, processing some trauma I went through if I'm still deep in the survival mode? And it makes me think of, you know, my my mom. She was just trying to figure out how to put food on the table for 4 kids on her own. So how could she have possibly focused on this anxiety that she was feeling, or depression? Even to this day, I feel like I've had more open conversations with my mom and asked her, how do you deal with these experiences? Like, how did this make you feel back then? And still, it's very hard for vocalize or verbalize those things. And she's like, oh, I don't know. Like, you just keep moving forward. Like, I had to do these things. Like, there was no room for me to just sit and cry for myself. So I really appreciate you speaking on that experience. How do you think people in the thick of it, people who are focused on just survival, like how can they, I guess, get some kind of reprieve during those
Mhm.
times?
Yeah, yeah. And I want to clarify, like, I'm not saying that because you're in survival mode that you're not going to have moments of joy, moments of peace,
Yeah.
like these like experiences. But I want to acknowledge that when you see it, like once you're healed, like your rose colored glasses and like
Yeah.
everything is better. But yeah, can you achieve growth mindset while you're still in survival mode? I think absolutely that's possible. But how think of it, where in survival mode are you, right? Like what
Yeah.
part of survival mode? Your mom needing to feed 4 kids, right? And needing to figure that out. Like it felt hard for her to give herself time to do anything else but focus on the task at hand and be very
Right.
goal oriented. Like I need to feed my children, so I need to do XYZ to feed them, and I'm going to focus on that. I know I'm tired. I know my back aches. I know these things are happening, but I need to do this for them. I can't do anything else. Now, in those moments, it's recognizing, well, you could, and our families are probably doing certain things for themselves that now maybe it's not traditional therapy or traditional healing, but it was something that was contributing to improving their mental health. So, for example, I would say prayer. Prayer is a form of mindfulness. It's very healing, it's very grounding, and you don't have to pay to pray
Yeah.
anywhere, right? Like you can do that. You can do that. So prayer in any faith community, people find a lot of comfort in having gathering spaces where it reminds them that they are not alone in this journey, that they have other people who maybe have shared experiences or other people who see them, see the challenges that they're experiencing. So having the faith community, the prayer, just the familial community, a lot of, immigrant cultures are collectivistic. So family is super important. And in Spanish, I'll say the chismes, the gossips, like what gossiping, although, I have mixed feelings about gossip or they're talking negatively about other people. But if you're like gossiping about the latest soap opera or the latest thing they sell, just sort of just the more mundane things, it again just brings lightheartedness to different conversations, right? So people's faith, people's prayer, and I always think of self-care, soul care. I think I heard someone say that recently, and I really love the idea of our soul care.
Yeah.
It feels more like, it feels, especially in cultures where it feels selfish. The soul care is, no, I'm literally trying to heal myself. And it might be just the few moments that you can give yourself to rest. It's not, maybe you can't, maybe you have 2 jobs and you can't, do all of the things. But I always like to break it down in like 5 minutes. Can you give yourself 5 extra minutes of sitting in the car or sitting or before you go inside your next destination to just even take a few deep breaths? You're like, okay, on to the next thing, but I can do this. But yeah, so that community I think is huge. And I think we need to remember how much all of these community systems and supports can change for us. And I don't know about you, but I know growing up, in the area I did, there were a lot of community service offerings and like resources to help out. And it's about just kind of finding them. And so I find that like we had like a local park, and at the local park they had like different classes, like sports and stuff. And so like that was really helpful because then our parents would put us in. My brother did basketball, we both did karate, and they would come. They would come to the park and watch us do this. But when they were doing that, they could go walk around the park and get exercise. They could, or they could like sit there and get a break from, whatever it is that was on their mind. Because for that moment, their child is playing the game, their child is, whatever they're doing. And the park was in their local community. So they had free and reduced like costs, options for students. And I think even in summers, most places I see parks will have different will partner with organizations to like have like lunches and meals for kids who are used to only having free lunches at school. Like I was I would get free lunch at school, right? And so finding those resources in the communities can be really helpful. And I guess if you're someone listening who can fund those resources, funding and creating those opportunities for communities is especially important.
Yes, I agree. And I feel as though that's been part of your mission is to support these communities, especially the communities that you grew up in. And so wondering if you can speak on that a bit more. Like, I know from this conversation, I'm gathering that a lot of your upbringing and your experiences has led you to the community that you came from. What are some of the unique challenges your community that they face, and how do you help to address them, or what is your goals in helping these people?
I think for me, it's just starting to continue to like destigmatize just like mental health, how we think about it, how we talk about it, so that we can stop when you mentioned intergenerational cycles, and I didn't really go too much into it, but a common cycle, at least within my community, is a cycle of silence. We don't talk about things, right? You keep it to yourself. You're careful around who you share it. And like I mentioned, we do have other sources like where people could lean into the community, could have that support. But just like with anything, you're only going to get what you put into it, right? So if I say prayer is something that can be really helpful for people, it's mindfulness. It's a grounding. But if you're not doing it, you're not getting benefits from it, right? You're not getting that support. So my community is working through that. And I do that through like, in terms of what's accessible and what's free for folks. It's like, that's why I always want to do podcast interviews, right? Because I'm like, this is accessible. This is going to go online. Folks can hear this. They can kind of get a few insights into learning some tools that might be helpful for them. I'll do it through the media. I've had an opportunity to do interviews in Spanish as well. So with Univision, Telemundo, and like that's really helpful but again, I have these opportunities because I did, that, right? I was like, because I have this degree, because I speak Spanish, because of all of like the different trainings and everything that I did just to get to this point is what opens up these opportunities. So then I could help provide more information for the communities that I want to serve. And then in my work, I do individual therapy. I do speaking engagements. I do different trainings. I recently added an offering that's like a pick my brain consultation where people, and I do that on a sliding scale. So when people have questions about like, hey, how did you do this? How did you navigate this? I'm always like, we can do a pick my brain, because the reality is I also have to protect myself from burning out. So it's sort of like that balance, because I want to do it all. And so like showing up in these spaces. And I recently launched a newsletter, which is free, so people can access more resources where, again, I share more articles. I collect things from kind of putting it all together to help people just streamline and find it all. And I think the biggest thing is also connecting with other folks who are wanting to do the same in terms of just improving our communities, offering more to our communities, increasing representation. And I think what I would love in my work and in everything I do at the core is just empowerment. Is for people to understand that they can do big things, they can have big dreams, as impossible as they may seem. I think that there's always a path. It may not be easy, and it likely is probably not short. It's probably long. I graduated from high school, and after I graduated from high school, it took me 13 years to become a licensed psychologist. 13 years to get to this point of this dream where I get to do all of these things. And when I became an entrepreneur, it took me a year and a half before I could jump into it full time and bet on myself. And now I've been working for myself for 2 years. And there's still so much growth, but I have learned so much throughout this whole journey of the importance of betting on yourself, the importance of seeking community. And as isolating as this experience can feel, you're never doing it alone. And it's about finding the right people to ask for help and figuring out how to truly bet on yourself. This did mean taking out loans. Did this mean going into debt? I see my cat back here, and I want to share. When I was in my postdoc, as a postdoc, I had my degree, but they pay you like you're not licensed, so they won't pay you very much. I was making $30,000 a year, living in Southern California, having to pay for myself. Yeah, anyone knows that's not my rent. I found a place where rent was more affordable, and it was like $1,500 a month, and I could walk to work, so that made it a little bit easier. But then he got sick. So my cat got sick, required a very expensive surgery. I didn't have the money for the surgery. But that was the moment that I was like, I have worked so hard. I've been in school for 13 years. I've done all of these things. I'm going to trust that future me has me. And so I literally maxed out all my credit cards to make sure he would be okay. because at that point I just was like, no, I need to have something that continues to ground me. And he's not like a official emotional support animal, but look at him.
Yeah.
He's definitely mine. He's definitely mine. So he's just, and so for me, it was in finding, and I give that example of for me because it's like sometimes there's, you know, it felt easy to make that decision, go into all of this debt, to do all of these things when it came to saving him. And I also did that when it came to saving me, when it came to going to school, when it came to betting on myself and doing all of this. But I want to add that's just one path, right? There's a lot of other paths to take. I don't think education is the only option.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up our episode here, I wanted to pick your brain. What advice you would give to someone who is a first gen Latin professional who's trying to dream big and trying to go and reach the impossible just like you, and who may not have the same kind of support or community, especially because you're the first one, right? You're trailblazing, but with that, it's a very, I can imagine, isolating path when you are the first one. So what kind of advice would you give to someone who I guess is basically like younger you back then?
Yeah. Oh my God, younger me would lose her mind. She'd be like, how are you doing all this? Because when I tell you how shy a kid I was, I'm not kidding. Like, I don't think I've ever said this, but I'm just gonna like when I was in karate, I was so shy that I would be too shy to ask to go to the bathroom, that most of the time I end up peeing myself because I was just so I want to say that because like that's the level of like shy and kind of scared and anxious that I was.
Yeah.
And I want to like the version of me that I see now sometimes surprises me because it's a level of confidence that I could only dream of when I was younger. So I want to say that because I'm like, I think when I'm talking to a younger version of me, it's, you know, like I hope that I whatever I'm doing doesn't ever seem inaccessible to anyone at any point, especially if you're growing up in the US. I did have some privileges that helped along the way. You know, like being born here and having access to resources there was a big one, being able-bodied. So I want to acknowledge those. But I often would find, you know, like self-comparison is such a big trap. You see other people who have an easier path and you just want that. And that sucks. It sucks. It sucks to have to work more. It sucks to like need to do all of these extra steps. But that's the reality of everyone's journey is different. And that's why I'm like, don't look at what is in anyone else's lane. Focus on what is in your lane. Focus on overcoming one small obstacle at a time, the baby steps. Like I said, my journey took those 13 years. It took a lot of really big sacrifices on my end. Well, yeah, the 2 hours away, I like joked, I was like, I needed to get out. But then it turned into, you know, I moved to the New York on the other side of the coast. I couldn't come home for holidays because I couldn't afford my flights home. I remember one Thanksgiving being in the New York apartment with like roommates, sitting there while everyone in my family was saying, Happy Thanksgiving, we're thankful for you. And me stifling my sobs because I missed them so much. But I was like,
Yeah.
But I'm here. This is the big dream. It's okay. It's worth it. So it was definitely a really emotional journey. It was definitely really hard. So I want to make sure that I'm not like, that doesn't sound sugar-coated in any way. Like this, it's not easy, but you got to just take the baby steps. And if you're feeling alone in it, we live now in a time where there are so many virtual resources, so many spaces. Even if you're not feeling like you can reach out to someone, you know, podcasts like this, listening to these episodes, reminding you that you're not alone, reminding you that there's still hope, that there's something that you can do. And something that I've been seeing more and more of recently are like, I think scholarships are great, but recently I've been seeing people offering just general grants to help people with things. And it's just about knowing where to look and beginning to ask questions. And like with that, it's stepping out of your comfort zone, as hard as that is, and just being willing to ask. You don't have to pay for things to begin to just learn about it. You can always ask, you can reach out, DM people on social media. If the first person doesn't answer, then ask another person. If they don't answer on the first message, send them another message. Send another message and follow up. You know, university, use your public libraries. Libraries are such an amazing free resource with so many people, like people who work at libraries, like they're amazing. Librarians have a lot of education, and they're there to like help you, they're there to support you.
Yeah.
If you're at a school, in a public school, depending on the school, like most of them have really good college resource centers. Some, people who work at these schools often work there because they're so passionate and they want to help the students. And so trusting that. So finding those mentors. And you know what I will say? I've always heard like find your mentor, find your North Star. I was like, what is that? What's that even mean? I like even after even like what does North Star mean? North Star is the big dream, right? Like so, and I read something the other day that's like make decisions based on your goals, not on your mood. And that really resonated with me because when we are feeling hopeless, we're making decisions based on our mood versus the goal that we have. So, and sometimes we need to rest. So if you have a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, and you're like, I just need to focus on surviving right now, give yourself self-compassion. So small steps, self-compassion, rest, support, and seeking out those resources where you can. And I'm telling you, there's just so many people online that want to help, that want to offer these resources. Just finding the space where you can begin. And yeah, I can keep going on and on. But Michelle, like I'm sure you've had so many guests who would also be amazing at being those resources too.
Yes. And again, I know you were acknowledging that this was not a sugar coated journey whatsoever for you, but I think that it is beautiful. Hindsight is 2020 for us to be able to look back on your story and recognize how far you've come, and now you are here in this space to be those resources for people who were younger you, and I think that's really beautiful. We'll be wrapping up the episode here now, but before we go, I'd love it if you could just plug for our audience like how they can connect with you, learn more about your work, and just support what you're doing now.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm most active on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at the First Gen Psychologist. I have a website and I'm going to spell it out for you, but I think it'll be in the show notes. So it's Calathea is CALATHEA wellness.com. And calatheas are plants. They're plant species that represent new beginnings or to turn over a new leaf. And for me, I specialize in working with first gens, and you're the new beginning for your families. So I think it's very special. So on Instagram, I offer free resources. I'm a writer, so I write a lot of articles. I contribute predominantly to Hip Latina, but I'm open and available for other freelance writing. I just started a newsletter, and my newsletter has a lot of first gen mental health, and in that newsletter, I have a column that I've launched that's called Consejos with Dr. Lisette. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you can have access to the link where you can submit your questions. And in future newsletters, I answer the questions and it's anonymous. So the question is anonymous. The answer is to an anonymous person. So, this is, again, if you're really shy, you have a question about mental health, first gen, BIPOC, whatever, please, you can subscribe to my newsletter and, I would answer it there and we never even have to interact. It's just a quick form. So it can make it real easy for folks. Can you tell that I'm speaking to my younger self? And I have a YouTube channel that I haven't been as active right now, but where I interviewed a lot of other mental health professionals. And I have I think around 30 or so episodes on it from last year, all different mental health resource related. And if you're a company listening to this, I am available for speaking engagements. I love speaking on any of the topics that I shared, but imposter phenomenon, leveraging first-gen strengths for success are two of my top favorite talks to do. And so I think I shared a little bit about the things that I do, but I'm just really passionate about what I do. And so I love going on podcasts and, just getting to connect. Community is big for me. Community is big.
Yes, and it's so clear the passion that you have. It's infectious, really. Love this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Those of you listening, if you'd like to stay informed on what Dr. Lisette is doing, I will obviously have all of her connections and things in the show notes for you to follow. Please go show her some love. Thanks again, Lizette, and thank you everyone for listening. And as always, I will talk to you soon.